Missional vision is about context, but it's also about priorities. A guy called Dwight D. Eisenhower, who happened to be a 5-star general in the U.S. Army, and then the 34th president of the USA, he had a mantra that he lived by, which was called the Eisenhower's decision principle. And he had it written over his desk, apparently, and it went something like this: what is important is seldom urgent, and what is urgent is seldom important. And those of you who have kind of studied time management may well know that a guy called Stephen Covey has used this to form a decision-making matrix, helping people to work through how they make decisions in their life and in their leadership. And this matrix looks a little bit like this. And many of you will know it. Bear with me. I just want to quickly recap what these 4 sort of quadrants are and what they mean. Quadrant 1, it talks about things that are both urgent and important. And these are things like tax deadlines. Your pregnant wife's kind of water is about to break or has broken. Things like your job applications. These are tasks that are both very important and they need our immediate attention, to have some kind of urgency about them. The gurus who kind of look at this stuff say to us that if you can, you need to work towards making this stuff less urgent with kind of planning and preparation. Quadrant 2 talks about things that are not urgent but are really, really important. And these are things which don't have any kind of pressing deadline, but nonetheless they help you achieve your life's goals and sort of mission. These are so typically centered around strengthening relationships, planning for your future, improving skills, that sort of thing. And these gurus tell us that we should spend most of our time in quadrant 2. These are the big ones. But the problem is that because there is no kind of pressing deadline to it, most of us never get around to them. I'll get a date night with my wife next week. I'll go to the gym next month. Definitely I'll go to the gym next month. I'll sort out my prayer life tomorrow. That kind of thing. When we make New Year's resolutions, we nearly always make them about this stuff. It's nearly always about quadrant 2 things. We never make New Year's resolutions about quadrant 3. Quadrant 3 are those things that demand our attention, but they don't have any sort of real inherent value. They don't work towards achieving our key goals and mission in life. These gurus say that we spend quite a bit of time in quadrant 3 thinking that we're in quadrant 1. And these tasks are often other people's agendas. They're often interruptions. It happens with Mr. Nice Guy, who is desperately trying to please others and yet not fulfilling his own mission and goal. Vicars and church leaders spend quite a bit of time into the quadrant 3. Quadrant 4 are neither important nor urgent. These are primarily distractions. If you spent 45 minutes reading other people's Facebook posts or half an hour watching the top 10 fails on a treadmill, which I have, you have been in quadrant 4. Again, we spend way too much time in this quadrant. It's actually useful to have some of this. These gurus tell us no more, though, than 5% of our time should be spent here in quadrant 4. I would say to you, if you have time later, it's a really useful exercise to go through your life and work out how much of your time you are spending in each of these sort of quadrants, what activities you are doing in each. If you want to know more about it, Google it. But I want to chat about something else. I want to use it to analyze what we are planting. But let me say this, and again, this is absolutely crucial. The siren has gone off, the foghorn is gone, the big red button is being pushed. If you've drifted off, come back to me. One of the biggest problems in planting is that we plant and focus on the urgent and not on the important. Every plant has something in box 1. It might look different for every plant, but every plant has it. And because it's still box one. It's not box three, things which are urgent but not important. It's box one. Because it's important, we are fooled into thinking that this is where we should sort of reside. This is where the thing which takes our focus, our energy, our attention, and stuff in box two, the really important stuff, languishes. And here are some examples of what is found in box one. Here's a big one. It's a massive one. It's something that nearly always happens, whether you are a fresh expression or a sort of contemporary church plant or a traditional church, whether you meet in a retail unit or a sort of warehouse or a Norman church. And what is that? Happens every week. It's the worship service. I've got more stuff to say on this, and we'll sort of come back to it. But that's one example of a box one activity. And so here are some other examples that I'll use from my friends, that plants that have been associated with Gateway. Joshua Den, which is a plant that is focused on targeting marginalized people. Stuff of box one for them is caring for the practical needs of the target group, the sort of drop-ins and the food and drink, the night shelter. For the chaplains that we have in the school and the college, the pioneer chaplains, it's the issues of pastoral support. For the young family stuff, it's the weekly gathered sort of session. For other plants that I know about, it's a plant called Verklempt, organizing the activity of emptying bins and feeding bellies. A dementia cafe, which is about supporting, engaging those who've sort of got dementia. Toddler groups and youth churches and sort of homeless ministries. Many other things. It will mean something specific for each one of those. And these things and activities and work, these are all important. But if I was to ask you that what lives in quadrant two for all of us, all our sort of Christian communities, our hubs, our plants, our activities, what would it be? And these things which are important, maybe the most important, but we never get around to it. One day, someday, tomorrow, next week. And there might be a number of ways of saying this, and there might be a number of things that sort of live and reside in box two. But one big one is the missional vision, the making and growing of disciples. And when we were sort of reflecting on this in our journey in Gateway a sort of few years ago now, we suddenly realized that we had a genuine problem. And that was that what we had set out to do hadn't happened, or hadn't happened enough, because what was urgent had overtaken what was important. And there are three big problems which this thought, a reflection brought up, and here they are. Box one, quadrant one stuff always happens not because of its importance, but because of its urgency. And we know that because there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens that lives in quadrant two, box two, which happens sometimes and sometimes not at all. And I actually remember asking a local vicar, a church leader, about where the key areas of community and discipleship and mission were in her church. What's their plan for making and growing disciples? And this person looked at me blankly and said, "We haven't got one, we do services." Quadrant one stuff always happens, not because it's important, even though it might be, but because it's urgent. Stuff in box one becomes what defines us. That's our second point. Stuff in quadrant one becomes the primary definition. If you were to ask any church to almost define what another church is, they will nearly always talk about what their worship service is or what their key activity or key mission is. If you ask the question for Joshua Den or Dementia Cafe or those chaplains that I sort of mentioned before, or many of the things, the answer will come from what they do in quadrant one. It forms the primary definition. And third and final thought reflection that that we thought about was that the stuff in box 1 becomes our center of gravity. It becomes the very essence of who we are. It absorbs our time, our energy, our creativity, our focus. We can't help it. That's how we work. Those things that are urgent for us becomes those things that we do and change, that we work on, that we prioritize. And if it isn't making and growing disciples, that isn't what we are going to do or change or work on or prioritize. And so one of the answers to this, easy to say but not easy to do, is to focus on the stuff that resides in box 2, the making and growing of disciples. Do what you can to increase the urgency of box 2. Our planning, our diaries, our prayer, our time, our energy, our creativity, our focus, our urgency, all on making and growing of disciples. Our humble suggestion is, if we do not do this, then we will never achieve this goal of what we have been called to and asked to. Jesus' last breath on earth, go and make disciples. We will not do it unless we are focused on it. And this is vital at the very beginning of our planting journey, of your planting journey. It is vital to discern carefully about what is the best way of making and growing disciples for that community or context or neighborhood or network that you are called to, and do that. Do that stuff. Plant that. The box 1 stuff is important, including worship. Worship is important, as we'll hear in a minute. Your plant may well involve a worship service in future, but don't plant it. Historically, nearly all sort of church plants or missional communities, thankfully not all, but nearly all, have focused on planting a worship service in a particular area or context and to the culture. Can I plead with you, in this thing that you are planting, unless there is a powerful and unequivocal call from God, don't do that. I know it goes against most received wisdom in planting, but I promise you it is nearly always a mistake. I've planted 2 churches in the last decade. I've been part of many, many others. We made the same mistake twice. I have seen it happen in plant after plant after plant. And so this first mark of the plant is mission. Missional vision is vitally important. Don't plant without it. Don't even go there without it. Missional vision is about context, who you are targeting and what they're like. And it is about priorities, focusing on box 2 and not being distracted about box 1.